Hello, you're listening to the Saluki Gamescast. This is episode 75. We are 3/4 of the way to 100.
Woohoo!
What is like the 75th anniversary? Is that like diamond or something?
Oh, heck if I know. I know the 150th is sesquicentennial because I worked for my undergrad university asking for money during our sesquicentennial year, so I had to get really good at saying that word, but I have no idea what 75 is.
It is diamond or gold.
Ah. So it is our diamond episode.
Oh, and Christina has a diamond pen.
I have a diamond pen.
There you go. It is March 8th, 2024. My name is Justin Young. Joining me, as always, are Alicia Utecht, Christina Ivey, and Mario Sanders. How's everyone doing?
It's almost spring break.
It is literally spring break. Like, as soon as we're done with this, I think we're all done. Can start our exciting spring breaks. Anyone have exciting plans?
I have family coming to visit.
Yeah?
Yeah, it'll be fun. And then...
Do you have anything planned in the big city of Carbondale?
Oh, no. we are gonna make brunch one day.
So what's brunch for you?
Brunch, okay, so for me, it is usually a Benedict of some kind, and lots
Cumberbatch?
Arnold?
No. No, I'm not going to say that. The kind you eat. I shouldn't have said that either.
I wasn't going to comment.
Listen, fart. Okay, rewind. It is eggs Benedict of some kind, and then lots of mimosas.
There you go.
That's yeah. Maybe we'll play bingo.
Okay.
Sure,
why not?
How long are they in town?
They're in town until Tuesday, and then I'm gonna stay at a hotel in St. Louis because there's a drag show Wednesday night that I'm gonna go to, and then I'm gonna come back and get my hair done.
Nice.
That is a great spring break for me.
That sounds pretty packed, actually.
Yeah.
We'll be pretty busy. Anybody else have exciting plans?
I think I'm mostly going to be here, honestly. We have our next Kleinau show is the weekend after spring break, and so I am expecting that we'll probably be here at a couple of times throughout the week just to prep what we can before the full big tech day on Saturday, and then be ready to go.
All right. That sounds busy.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it'll be busy, but it'll be good. I get my prelims back the Monday after spring break, and I start an 8-week course the Monday after spring break. So my goal is to just enjoy as much relaxation as I can.
Well, this morning at like 8:30, I was downstairs in one of the computer labs meeting with a group of students for the video game development class that Kevin was talking about last week when he was on the show. And so we finished our level this morning. We finished,
nice.
uploaded it. Some of the scripting's not done yet, but like that was okay. We just had to have everything else in place, all the animations and all that. So theoretically, after like spring break, we'll actually have a game that's playable.
Yay.
At least in testing.
So we'll do a special episode where we beta the game, right?
Well, I mean, when the game is ready, like you can all play it.
I love that.
I mean, it's going to be available free online, so it'll be on like itch.io at least there when it's fully done. But that won't be until closer to April when we're fully done. Nice. So we've got a couple weeks of testing, I think, when we get back.
Nice.
If I remember, it's the goal. The goal is to have it ready by the eclipse day. Is that right?
Yeah. So I think to have it before that weekend leading into the eclipse, because the eclipse is the Monday, April 8th. Yeah.
It's coming up.
So, yeah, that's like, believe me, building a game in the first half of the semester with a hard set deadline is no picnic.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm actually impressed. I'm impressed by everybody actually getting it done and getting something put together. I mean, I haven't seen all the other levels other than I've briefly viewed them like while people were working, and I mean they all look really cool. So it'll be interesting when it's all put together.
Is
and
this
everything.
is this a graduate class or is there undergraduates?
There's some undergrads too. It's actually fewer grads and more undergrads.
Wow.
So, but it's a lot of people who are coming from a background of like graphic design and animation
nice.
and like that sort of stuff. So, those of us with neither of those backgrounds and then being told, yeah, just go design all this stuff. And it's like, okay, well, here's Mr. Stickman. Who wants to meet Mr. Stickman?
I love it.
My favorite part, though, so far, and I'll probably talk about this later, is that I'm 100% positive that the people who know me the best, like my friend David, and Derek, who obviously listens to this podcast and sends us questions sometimes, that when they see the game, they'll know which level I did almost instantly. Like they're going to just look at it and go, "Oh God."
There's gonna be Garfield all over the place.
No, we can't use Garfield. Garfield's legally protected.
There's gonna be an orange cat named Field Gar.
Just Filled, the big orange cat who wanders around the level and offers you plates of lasagna. But yeah, we probably will do something with the podcast with that. So Kevin and I talked about maybe that being something we could do.
Oh, that's cool.
That would be so fun.
'Cause it's neat. Like, I mean, even me not being part of it, even if I wasn't part of it, like the fact that students are building a game here is really kind of fun and exciting.
Yeah.
Especially because like we've talked recently about like how much goes into building a game.
Right.
To have like to be able to talk with folks about like, okay, so what went into this, like, and then us as players, so having that kind of dynamic conversation, I think would be really good for us to reflect on.
Yeah, I know one of the things that Kevin has talked a lot about is feature creep. Because you'd be setting in everyone working and somebody would say, why don't we add this? And he's like, oh no. Like, we have a set deadline. We have to be done by this day.
Right.
And like, I mean, that is absolutely what happens with game design, right? That is absolutely what happened with some of the most infamous cases ever, like Duke Nukem Forever.
Oh, yeah.
Right? Like they kept adding stuff into that game. And if you do that, you'll never finish.
Yep.
Yeah.
I will say that the same applies if there are graduate students listening, and for you two who will soon begin to work on your dissertation, same thing applies. There reaches a time where the best dissertation is a done dissertation.
Oh no, it's me.
Yes, I'm looking at you, Alicia. just do it.
The thing about a film is you can get stuck in the editing bay, like trying to edit frame perfect. I'll cut 3 frames here. I'll add 2 frames over here, right? Like, so you can still get into that sort of a mess. But at least the film has a self-contained sort of time span. It's going to be about 2 hours long, right? So you can't theoretically work on that forever, though some people have fallen into that before. But with a video game, it is kind of weird because you can just keep adding stuff. Like, there's not a set, classic game development. If you're making a game for Atari or the original NES, then you were limited by cartridge space. But now you have almost unlimited space.
Right.
So you could keep adding stuff forever. And I think that's a useful lesson in creating art, like, having some constraints put on yourself.
Yeah, for sure.
So anyways, we'll do more of that at a future date. Why don't we jump into what we've been playing? Alicia, you were out last week, so have you been playing anything?
I have. So I beat the main storyline for Super Mario Wonder.
Yeah.
Which
Cool.
That game is just so fun. Like, I know everyone who's played it has already said that a million times on the podcast, but that game is so fun. And like now I'm having a lot of fun with especially the way that they do online play. Like some of the expert badge challenges, I will freely admit I can't do on my own. Like I'm just like I'm just dead. Thank God I don't lose lives in these levels. But then the fact that I'm able to play online and have other people be there and be, hey, they're right past the point that I'm stuck on. So I just get my little ghost over there and come back to life past the point I was stuck on. And even I think it was one of the jumping ones. There was a person there was 3 of us who kept doing that for each other. Like if somebody died, we didn't move on until they caught up and managed to skip the part that was too hard.
Yeah.
So I just think that's absolutely delightful. I am having a blast going back now and trying to, some of the levels that I'd skipped before or catch up on the badge challenges that I'd skipped before because I was like, I have enough Wonder Seeds. It's fine.
That's really interesting. You talking about people working cooperatively to get through the levels because that's something Nintendo has been working at for a very long time. Mm-hmm. So they started it with adding P-Wings. If you died enough times, they give you a P-Wing so you could kind of fly over the levels, skip it. Mm-hmm. And Nintendo's sort of thing is, well, we want people to actually finish our games.
Yeah.
Right? We want, whoever it is, if it's a 6-year-old kid, if it's a 80-year-old person, right? We want them to be able to finish the game. We don't want to make games that are just frustrating. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. But how do you do that and not strip all the fun and all the challenge out of the game at the same time? And I think sometimes they've leaned too much in the direction of stripping some of that value.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But doing that in a way that makes it cooperative and fun is actually really cool.
Yeah. And if you don't want it, you can just shut off online play. But if you want it and you're like me where you're solid at this game, but not phenomenal.
Right.
You get to play with people who are goodness only knows where in the world.
Right.
Who just happen to be on at the same time as you are.
Which is also kind of validating too, because especially if it's a situation like you were just talking about where all of you were having trouble and helping each other, it's not just I'm awful, I can't get past this part. It's no, this is a difficult part. We're all struggling. We're all going to help each other. Mm-hmm.
Which is a very different online interaction than I think most people have, right?
Yeah.
Outside of Mario, some of the stuff that you do playing with friends together, right? Sort of the cooperative stuff that you do with the randomizers. I think most of the time online play is competitive, right? And this is a way of how do we take Mario and make it a cooperative game without stripping all the challenge out of it.
Well, and I think even, whether it's cooperative or competitive, there's usually an aspect of you are communicating through words with the other people in some way. If it's cooperative, Dead by Daylight, if you're all trying to survive, you're
just
communicating
and
in some way.
Doing this.
So it's really interesting having absolutely zero way. I will never ever find who these people are. I will never connect with them. Even by the time we do beat the level and we go on to different ones, I will never connect with these people again in any way, but just through the motion of no, I'm staying put at the edge of this, or I'm putting this, you can put a standee, but you can't revive on your own standees. So I see you put the one there. I'm going to put one here. That way you can use a standee at this same spot.
Did you ever play the game Journey? Mm-mm. So you talking about, you're matching up with somebody and then you're never going to meet up with this person again. And you just kind of have this, sort of kismet relationship with them, and you help each other and then you get to the end and you part ways. And it's this sort of beautiful memory of this person that I never talked to them. I don't know their voice. So maybe they're an 8-year-old kid yelling at me because I'm screwing up. Or
maybe they're a dad who's used to their 8-year-old kid screwing up.
or maybe it's a 65-year-old grandmother who is trying to play their grandkids' game system and is excited that somebody is being kind and helping them. And that game is really cool in that way. And so I hadn't really thought about Mario doing the same thing, which it kind of is from that perspective. And that's neat.
Mm-hmm. Is that PC or?
It was PlayStation originally, but I think it's come to PC and I feel like probably Xbox.
Okay.
I don't actually know.
I'm going to have to look that up because that sounds, it's absolutely delightful. Like, and like you said, I don't know their names. I don't know their voices. Half the time, because it just identifies you by your Switch username. Mm-hmm. And so like I'll see names with kanji and be like, I can't even read this. So like I just know, hey, it's Mario or hey, it's Peach. And so, but I
say that every day when I come into the podcast studio. Hey, it's Mario.
But like just being able to have that, okay, here's 15 minutes where we're together and we're working towards the same goal with no idea of who the other person is other than just that it's another human being.
Right.
Then that we're all trying to have fun. And it's just absolutely delightful.
Yeah, that is cool. That's neat. All right, Super Mario Wonder, anything else?
So that's the only game I've been playing, but I do need to shout out, I've been watching Final Fantasy VII Rebirth. I'm probably about a third of the way through, but I'm like now to the point where I have to actively dodge spoilers rather than just avoiding them. But I'm right about heading towards Corel, which...
Wait, so you're watching people play this, but you're trying to avoid spoilers in the process?
Yeah. I'm watching YouTube videos. I'm not watching people on Twitch. Okay. And I'm not reading the comments to avoid spoilers.
So are you watching like a no commentary playthrough then? Okay.
Yeah. No, I just like...
Yeah.
That sounds difficult.
Like I said, I'm, the first couple days, it was all right. I could read the comments because the game itself, I think now I'm starting to see videos of the full game and it's like 42 hours. Mm-hmm. So, the first couple days, no one had gotten far enough for spoilers.
Right.
But like now I'm like, nope, I can't read the comments. I just need to hit play and like turn my phone so it's full screen so I don't even see the top comment pop up. But it is absolutely amazing. Like I said, I'm right about they're heading towards Corel, which, side note, I've always pronounced Coral, and it's throwing me off that they pronounce it Corel. But I'm just having such a good time. I'm absolutely loving how they're able to very similar to how like Remake managed to update and still incorporate like cloud cross-dressing. Mm-hmm. The ways that they update and still bring in these fun moments from the original game while also having moments that weren't there and getting to see like the entire sequence of Rufus's inauguration parade and getting to interact with him there is so much more fleshed out. The Midgar 7th is incredible, and Square Enix out here making me cry over troopers that they don't even bother to give names to. It's literally just Trooper A through E, and I'm like, really? I better see them again. You promised me I'll see them again.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's really interesting because, like they could have went a very dark, serious route with that, right? Because the thing that people talk about with that game a lot of times is the sort of like dark, serious side of the story.
Yeah.
Right? When it gets talked about by a lot of players, that's what gets talked about. But like that's a really goofy game.
Yeah.
Too. Like there's just as much goofiness and weirdness in there. And so it is neat to see that they kept all of that and they didn't strip that out and they like actually embraced it. I mean, at least I haven't played this one or even seen much of it, but like, I know in Remake, they really did keep a lot of that and embrace it. And that's part of why that works so well as a remake, as an expansion of the original.
Yeah, and I think that Rebirth is definitely continuing as Remake did with that. Like, we're not going to pretend that the serious things aren't serious, but we're also not going to be doom and gloom all the time and depressing, and like we're gonna have fun.
We're not gonna Zack Snyder it.
Yeah. Exactly.
All right. Well, that's a game I want to play. I don't know when I'll have free time to actually play it, but I'll get maybe someday.
I said I'm counting on having spring break to be able to sit and just like finish watching. And even the walkthrough that I'm watching is doing like some of the side quest stuff, but not a ton of it.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I probably won't sit and watch something that does 100% of the side quests until I go home and my sister does 100% of the side quests.
Yeah.
But I'm very glad that we have a week off after this where I don't have to worry about homework and classes and work and be able to just sit and watch and get through it all. That way I can stop having to dodge spoilers.
Sure. All right. Christina, what have you been playing?
So I talked about Papers, Please a couple weeks ago. And I was just curious as to why the person that I was watching decided to play that game since it was an older game. And apparently it's because a newer game just came out called That's Not My Neighbor, which is like, imagine Papers, Please was made into a horror cartoon. And it, instead of being set like in a, like it being a country, it's you are the door person of an apartment building, and the area that you're in, planet, I don't know, is being overrun by these creatures called doppelgangers, and doppelgangers try to sneak their way into various places by copying people that they see. And so the like paperwork that you get is this, you're checking it to make sure that they're not these like alien doppelgangers. And so part of one of the things you do is that instead of in Papers, Please, where it's, you see just kind of like a, I don't know, a muddled shape of a person, like it's actual like cartoon type characters. You have to pay close attention to if they have a mole, that it's on the right side of their face. Sometimes they'll have worms coming out of their face, and when you ask them about their appearance, they're like, what are you talking about? Oh, these are just pimples. Like, or there was one where this woman's head was just rotating, like it was her body, and then her head was floating above her body and just rotating. And when you ask her why, she was like, "Oh, I have a cold." And so, like, it's meant to be a little campy, but the horror part of it is that if you accidentally let a doppelganger go into the building, at any moment they'll come snatch you, and that'll be the end of the game. And so it's just in order to like get rid of whoever it is, you stop the game, you contain them, and then whoever the organization is comes in to clear them. And so you can accidentally kill your actual human neighbors too if you do that. So it's just like an interesting take on that Papers, Please game that I talked about a couple of weeks ago. It's really interesting.
That's cool. I don't think I've ever even heard of that. I've played Papers, Please, but I haven't heard of this new one.
Yeah, this is a newer game, and there's what's fun about it isn't necessarily trying to get it right, because that seems to be fairly easy, like to get an S rank for it. It comes in like trying to get the various types of the various achievements. So like there's this one person who comes through that kind of like in Papers, Please, the old man who was just really trying to get in, that would create a random passport and stuff, and you almost feel sorry for him because he just really wants to get into the country. There's like an old dude who kind of looks like an old stoner, if I'm being honest, and he asks you random questions based on some of the knowledge that you gain throughout the game, and if you get it, you get a special achievement for him. There's a character that looks like a clown that hands you a piece of paper that's like, that essentially it's alluding to another game that this developer has created, and is like, do you see this clown in your nightmares? And if you don't, you have to open the door, close the door, and if you forget to close the door, he will run quickly into the building. And so if you can prevent that from happening, then you get an achievement. And so the fun part of the game isn't necessarily playing the game, it's like playing it in such a way that you get these achievements. So It's really interesting.
Oh, that sounds interesting.
Yeah. And then a game that I'm sure we'll talk about here in a minute, the Princess Peach Showtime
Yeah,
demo.
if you want, let's go ahead and talk about it now.
Oh, okay. So I really liked it. Like, it's super simplistic, and Justin and I talked about this, but like I don't know what the end game is going to look like, but I think I enjoyed it because it allowed Princess Peach to be the queer icon she was always meant to be, with her like changing her outfits and doing these fun little things with little characters. I don't know. It's adorable. It is a princess. It's what you think a Princess Peach game is gonna be, and I hope they're able to extend it in some fun ways.
Yeah, you and I chatted a little bit about it. I don't know, did either of the other two of you play it?
I did not have
I
a
didn't.
chance.
I would.
I want to. I just
Yeah, I mean, I think it's worth playing the demo. Yeah, it's an interesting game, isn't it? Because it's like, okay, so the setup for people who are listening, you are Princess Peach. You get invited to go to a playhouse, like a building that shows plays, and it's kind of looks like a multiplex movie theater.
Yeah.
And that there's like all these different doors that kind of go off. And so it's sort of like the castle in Super Mario 64.
Yeah.
But you are going off to see different shows. So like this one playhouse is showing multiple plays at the same time, which is kind of like a cute, fun idea to begin with.
Very gay. No, I'm just kidding. I'm kidding.
And then when you go into those levels, like you are on the stage and you are like playing out in different styles. So each level is a different style. So the first one that you do is the sword fighter. So you're basically running left to right, and you eventually get a sword and you can attack enemies. It allows you to counter the enemies as they're attacking you. So you can like flip over their heads and everything. And that becomes a mechanic you have to use to battle some of the enemies. And that's all that the presentation wise, that's all really cool. It looks cool. Like the sets all look like real sets. And that, you know, they look like they're made out of like plywood and like they're being kind of moved around on the stage and stuff. And so it's got a very cool aesthetic in that way. And I would say even the gameplay sort of reminds me of the last Kirby game, the 3D one.
Forgotten Land.
Forgotten Land. And that my problem with that game when I started playing it was, okay, this is way too simple. I'm going to get bored with this in about 10 minutes. And then as I played, they layered some onto it, and that game started to become more interesting as you played more of it, right? I had the same feeling about this. Like when I first started playing through that level, I was like, oh no, this is going to be terribly boring. And then as I progressed a little bit more, I got to where I was like, okay, well, this is actually, they could do something cool with this. But right when we got to that point, the level was over.
Yeah. So essentially each play is a different level, and each play is also like almost like a different genre of gaming. So like obviously the sword fighting is like kind of platformer-y, and then the second level, and it's only 2 in the demo, feels like if you've ever played the mini games in Mario Party. Because you get to be Patisserie Peach, where you like dress up like a
baker.
Yeah, like a baker, and it's little mini games where you're like baking cookies and
decorating
cakes. Yeah. So it's kind of cute, but it's also like it reaches its expiration pretty easy. Like Justin was saying, it's like, oh yeah, getting used to this, and then it's over.
Yeah, and I think we talked about it, that it does feel very much like a Mario Party mini game, and it also kind of has the like staying power of a Mario Party mini game, and that like by the time you get to the end of it, you're like, okay, that was cool, but I don't know that I really want to do that for 10 more levels.
Yes.
Right? Like there's the part when you're decorating the cakes, I think was the part that I found the most fun out of there.
Yeah.
But like even by the time I got to the end of it, I was like, okay, well, that was neat, but I'm not sure how much more of that I want to do. And so they do show off, like at the end, they give you a little teaser trailer, and they do show off all the different costumes or some of the different costumes. I'm imagining they're not showing us some of the ones.
Right.
And I don't know, there were 8 to 10 or so different costumes they show off, and each one is a different play style, it looks like.
Yeah. Like some of them, it looks like she's dressed like she's going to be a fighter, like a fighting type game. Yeah, but some of one of them is the one that you mentioned is like
superhero.
Yeah, it's like she's dressed as a superhero, and it's like a scrolling game where
Like a side scroller shooter.
Yes. And so you're like attacking different like alien crafts and stuff. The whole enemy is this spider-looking lady named Grape.
Yeah.
Which I'm just like
Sour grapes.
Right? I'm all about like it's very gay. Like a big lady icon basically. And so yeah, her little minions are the ones that are destroying the plays that you've got to go in and do it. So that's who you're attacking in that side scroller, but it just I don't know how complex it's gonna be. Like Justin mentioned that he thought it might be a good game for like kids.
Yeah, this was developed, my understanding, by the people who did the last 2 Yoshi games. So like Yoshi's Woolly World and those. And I don't know if you've played those, but those games they're neat, but they're so simplistic as to get boring pretty quickly. And for anybody who has experience, right? Like they're nowhere near like the complexity of a Mario Wonder, right? They're way more stripped down. And so when I played Woolly World, I know I kept thinking, this looks really cool and I like the concept. I just wish they did more with it. And that's the same way I felt with this. And granted, this is just a demo, so maybe there's a lot more depth to it. But the way I kept feeling playing it was, I think I would get bored of this game really quickly. But my youngest niece, I could see being really into it. Like that maybe it's at her level, and it's certainly fun that like you're dressing up in different costumes, and each one means that you're playing a different style of game. So you're getting lots of different types of games to play.
Yeah.
Like that's all cool.
That might honestly be its saving grace in the sense of like trying to, if it was just one of these costumes for a 3-hour game, it might get really old. But if you're doing like 12 different small games, it might, have a bit more, because you can get to that point of like, all right, I'm sort of over this, but this sort of style of gameplay will probably be over shortly.
It also makes sense then why it may be for kids, like for folks who or like people who don't play a lot of games, and so it gives them a chance to explore different genres and be like, if you liked this level, well then here are games that are platformer based. Like if you like the sword fighting level, here's some games you may like.
Well, because that was going to be my question, is the problem that because it's sort of dipping its toes into all of these different things, does it not get deep enough into any one of those things? But that might be a purposeful decision.
Yeah.
That's what I was kind of thinking too, is like it's your, hey, here's your puzzle game with the Sherlock outfit, and here's your platformer with the sword, and like.
Well, it's that jack of all trades, master of none.
Yes.
Right? And so my feeling was that sword fighting segment, if you took that and extrapolate it, and maybe they do, maybe there's 10 levels of that, and maybe it's completely satisfying. But if there's just like 1 or 2 more levels of that, I think I would walk away from the game being sorely like sort of disappointed. But like you could take that design of, playing on the stage and like slowly gaining new abilities and make a really cool kind of fun platformer
For sure.
for for Princess Peach. Like I can see you taking that into a full game. Maybe
Alternatively,
not the
though,
baking stuff.
I was about to say, if it was 10 levels of the baking stuff, though, that would get frustrating.
Yeah.
So kind of going back to what you asked, Mario, like some levels, I want more. I want this to be a cool platformer. At the same time, I don't want 10 cake decorating because it was so frustrating. And the little minions they're not minions, but whatever they were, they just kept getting in my way, and I was like, I was getting frustrated in a way that I did not want to get frustrated at a Princess Peach game.
Just sort of laughing at what Justin said, like this is just like publicly distributed that you have to pay for focus group testing. Like, what Princess Peach game do you actually want, people? Which one do you respond to most positively? Because that's going to be the next Princess Peach game you get.
Well,
I don't hate that.
I mean, you have to pay $60 to participate in it.
Oh, never mind.
I mean, it's not a terrible idea to say, hey, we're going to try a bunch of different things and we're going to see what people respond to, right? Like there's that in of itself is not like actually a terrible idea, but like those things have to be good and it has to amount to a $60 worthwhile game.
Right. Well, it's like the
How long was the demo? I'm sorry to cut you off.
Oh no,
Christina.
it's fine. The two levels. I downloaded it last night and finished it last night.
Yeah.
Maybe an hour.
Okay.
Like, yeah, probably not even that long. 30 minutes to an hour tops.
Yeah, the hour I included was like the download time because like I hadn't turned on my Switch in a little while, and so several things had to update. But it's what that made me think of though is like, did any of you ever play the Toad game that was
Treasure
the little
Tracker.
Yes,
Yeah.
Treasure Tracker. Yes, I loved that game.
It's a good game.
That's a good game.
And I think what I loved about it is it felt very much like a Toad game, like a game. The only frustrating part about it was you couldn't jump, and I'm like, but Toad seems like he wouldn't be able to jump, you know what I'm saying? And so, I don't know, like the puzzle element of it and the fact that it did change and morph and become, I don't know, really interesting.
But that's from, was it Super Mario 3D World?
Yeah.
Like those levels, and then they made that into a full game, which is kind of, I think, Mario, what you're saying, like, do they take one of these, like, little plays and go, hey, people really like this. Let's make a full Princess Peach that's this game.
And I wouldn't be surprised. I say, like I said, I say it jokingly that this is what they're doing, but I wouldn't be surprised if there is one that like is sort of a consensus. This is the best part of this game. I wouldn't be surprised if that gets fleshed out into a larger game. I'll be interested to see how long the game is in its entirety. If I don't know how long like the Yoshi games where I didn't play either of those.
They're fairly short.
Yeah.
That's sort of what I figured. If this is like a sort of 5 hours max type of game,
That would be my guess.
Yeah.
that's sort of what, even just hearing, okay, the demo is about an hour-ish.
Yeah, there
at
was
most.
there was like 4 levels downstairs, and like I said, we only covered 2. There's a downstairs area that was blocked off that we couldn't get to, and there's an upstairs. So exactly,
It is very much the 64 castle. Then.
yes. So I'm assuming that there won't be more than 4 levels downstairs or upstairs. So yeah, you're probably looking at about 5 hours.
Yeah, I mean, which, if it's 5 hours, that's really great.
Yeah.
Then you don't really mind. But I mean, again, I think part of the problem with this game is Nintendo has been so sort of cagey with what this game is. And like, I feel like I still don't know what this final game is going to be. Even after playing it, I feel like I have a better idea. Like, I feel like I have a better idea that some of the things are going to be very mini game-ish, like the baking stuff. But, I still feel like, well, maybe there's more to this game. And what I worry is there's not.
Yeah.
Like, maybe what the feeling I'm getting is exactly what this game is. And if that's the case, that's a little disappointing. I would say it's not a $60 game for most people.
No.
But maybe there will be more. Maybe there's something more to it, and I'll be surprised. I mean, Luigi's Mansion was a game that when they first showed that off, you kept looking at it going, there's got to be more to this game. And then you played it and you're like, okay, well, actually there kind of is more to this. This is actually like a really, obviously became like a great series over time. So maybe this will take that same path. I don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think, and I mean, I haven't played it. I don't know. I can only based off of what you're saying. I think the thing that I hope doesn't happen, but I wouldn't be surprised if it happens, is that the game ends up being maybe a little too safe. Like they don't like really kind of go for it. And so it ends up being, I know we've talked about like that stereotypical like 7 out of 10 that it's not bad, but it's not really anything anybody would enthusiastically recommend to somebody else.
Yeah.
And that's the Yoshi games.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like there's quality there.
Outside of maybe, your young niece, right? Like
Right.
it's a perfect game for, that person, but
And I think it's cool that Nintendo makes games like that.
Mm-hmm.
I just think, you want to be clear, like this is a game for
Yeah.
little kids. This is not Mario, where little kids and their parents can play together, or Pikmin, or
For sure.
Kirby, or those games that really kind of cross those divides.
And there's sometimes where when like Nintendo tries to do something new, they struggle with how to market it. And with this being kind of a new type of game, like I was thinking about the Wii U. Wii U was like an amazing console, and they did not market that at all. Like I think that's why it crashed. And so maybe it's just a matter of like they didn't know how to market this game at all. Like I knew it was coming, and I was excited because it was Princess Peach, but
and I could get that if there's 10 different things that you're doing.
Yeah.
Like we don't want to market this as a fighter. We don't want to market
Yeah.
this as a sort of hack and slash, because you're only going to be doing that for
Right.
45 minutes.
And I think it's also like it's difficult in this day and age. So like I can imagine this game getting released 20 years ago, and they would be, hey, we made a game for girls.
yeah, that's what I was thinking. Yeah.
And like nowadays, you can't say that.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
And so, like, how do you market a game that you're like, well, we're making a game that we think will appeal particularly to young girls, and like with the elaborate costumes and the the baking stuff and everything. Like, and I don't mean that dismissively.
Yeah.
Like, I think that's cool to make a game that specifically targets that demographic. And yes, girls play Mario and they play Kirby and they play all this other stuff too. But like we make games all the time that specifically target boys.
Mm-hmm.
It's very rare that we make a game that seems like it's specifically made for girls. And at the end of the levels, you are winning like clothing items as
Yeah.
rewards. So like I very much got the impression, okay, there's going to be like a dress up section
Yeah.
at the end where you can mix and match costume pieces. And as goofy as it sounds, like I think we talked about this when the game was announced, like tapping into that Barbie market. And taking Princess Peach and letting you dress her up.
Yeah, that's what it
Yeah.
is. Because there is an area in the back of the ground floor of the theater that has like her dress, and it doesn't show up until after you finish level 1.
Right.
And so I think that's going to be an area that you can go to mix and match her outfits.
Yeah, and it'll be really cool if you can mix and match. Not just go back there and change from one outfit to another, but actually take different pieces. Like
Yeah,
wear
yeah.
the baking hat while you're wearing the like sword fighter tights or like
Yeah.
whatever. And like that I could see like little girls getting like big kicks out of that. And that being, and especially if you had stuff for them to do past
Yeah.
the levels.
If like the outfits come with various like
Abilities
yeah,
or stuff.
yeah,
Or something
yeah.
like that, yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, I am, I guess, trepidatious about this game. Like, I don't know where it's going to go. I'll be interested in seeing, like, the early reviews of it. But I'm also, like, not hating the game.
Yeah.
Like, I think there is a charm to it.
I guess my other hope is that, because the other way that I guess I'm feeling like you're talking about it is that if this game is designed more for a younger audience as well, or in addition to as like a target demographic, I guess I hope that people who would be reviewing it, or just like gamers in general, which is maybe a big ask, like would recognize that.
Yeah.
It's like,
Mario, what fantasy world do you live in?
I guess that's my, one of my issues is just like games have become maybe too mature,
Right.
like in
Yeah.
terms of like what they're trying to do. Like, I think that like, I don't mean that like that's the stories they're telling, but like, I feel like the majority of games, like big AAA games that come out outside of Nintendo, are like M-rated games.
Right.
Yeah.
They're meant for an adult audience.
Well, Sony and Microsoft don't make family games anymore.
Yeah.
No.
I would say outside of maybe Spider-Man, but I'm not going to give that to like a 6-year-old
Yeah,
as
yeah.
well, because I just think that's probably, there's probably like a complexity
It's too complex, yeah.
of the game.
Ratchet and Clank, maybe.
Yeah,
you
I think that's a, yeah.
Which even that's a throwback to earlier
Yeah.
times. They're not making anything new that's...
Well, I mean, they did put out a new Ratchet and Clank game.
but like it's
couple
not a
years
new
ago.
series, is what I mean.
Yeah, sure. But I guess, like I said, I think that's the other hope that if the game is simplistic, I think that that's not a critique or a bad thing. That like people are reflexive enough to recognize that like maybe this just is not
For them.
Yeah, I'm not the targeted
Yes.
audience.
And I think that's always challenging
And I'm not
because
saying that that's what anybody, that's what either of you are saying. It's just like,
Yeah.
I feel like I can see that being people's response to it
Yeah.
of this game is too easy and blah, blah, blah,
Right.
blah, blah. And so,
Yeah.
and I think that's always challenging because like I grew up playing Donkey Kong. Right? Donkey Kong was a game for everyone. Like
Yeah.
adults were playing it in bars, kids were playing it in arcades. Everyone played Donkey Kong, right? And so when you look at, and so somewhere along the way, I mean, you're absolutely right. Like past the, like, say, Super Nintendos, we get into the 32-bit, and PlayStation and all that. We start making games that were specifically for adults, which is cool. It's cool that we got stuff like Resident Evil. But then, those kids' games start to dry up. And I think the thing that really is weird is we stopped making as many games that were made for like the entire family where kids could play them, but adults would get some joy and challenge out of them as well.
Yeah.
And Nintendo does that extremely well. The Mario games still do that. Like Mario Odyssey is a game that kids can play, at a certain age. Like don't give it to a 3-year-old, I guess. Maybe they would struggle. But like kids can play that game and then adults can enjoy it as well. And it feels like, it's the thing I always think about, like with movies, right? Like
I'll say it's definitely a trend we've seen like in television and movies too, because like you go back to the 90s and 2000s with like Teen Titans, Avatar: The Last Airbender, like those kinds of shows that you watch as a kid and you just enjoy, and then you watch as an adult and you're like, this is deeper than my 8-year-old self picked up on.
yeah. So like we don't get movies like Back to the Future anymore.
Yeah.
Right? So we've kind of bifurcated the market. So we make movies that are very much for little kids, like all your animated movies. And then we make movies that are for adults. And occasionally there are the movies that kind of cross over that. The
Inside Out that's coming out.
Yeah, the Pixar type movies. And so I think that's the challenge people face with something like this is how do you talk about something like, is this a game trying to split that market or is it a game trying to like do that crossover like Mario does? And I think like that's the issue I have at the end of playing that demo is I still don't know.
Yeah.
and I think the problem is the what led to that is just this like need to legitimize the industry as like a serious medium or just like the medium itself. Like we need to be taken seriously, so we need to make serious games, and serious games can't be for kids or
Yeah.
so.
That's exactly what we were talking about with Final Fantasy VII, right? Like, if you were making that game today, and in fact they did, they made Final Fantasy 16. And, Kevin, when he was on last week, was talking about that game is super serious and has lost some of the charm of older Final Fantasy games.
There'd be no cloud cross-dressing if it was Final Fantasy VII instead of Final Fantasy VII Remake. There'd be no Red 13 dressing up in the sailor suit, having to stand on 2 feet. There'd be no any of that.
Yeah, and that's fine. Like we can make The Last of Us, that super serious game. But yeah, I mean,
And I'm sorry.
no, just the fact that like it feels like everything has to be that, it seems problematic.
And I also just wonder if that has to do with like a notion of like graphical realism. When you're depicting Final Fantasy 17 as like these are very clearly polygons that are interacting with one another, it doesn't feel as real as like these two characters in Final Fantasy 16, or even just like the depiction of the way that like violence gets depicted, or
Right.
and so like I
was
feel like that probably has to play a role in that as well.
I was thinking that too when you were saying, because I was thinking about like we've had this conversation before about how many games look the same now
Yeah.
versus like
We will have that when
they-
we talk about the Xbox Partner Showcase here in a few minutes.
Yeah, versus like when games do lean into like a unique art style and like unique thing, and like you said, I think it's part of that swinging so far on the video games were not legitimate before, and now we need to legitimize them by making them.
They're too much for kids, so we need to sort of swing it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I think that is trouble, like a problem that folks have with art forms, period, because like whoever wins the Animation Academy Award, like it wins Academy Award, and yet it doesn't get taken as seriously as some of the other things, I think, or it's like not seen as a big of a deal. I think about the like sociocultural things that are happening because of drag, and like there being this thing that where folks only see drag as like adult entertainment, where there's legitimate forms of drag that can be addressed to children, or that can cross that line where both parents and kids can go to a show and enjoy it and get quote unquote age appropriate things from it.
I think you're right. I think a lot of people hear drag and they think burlesque.
Yes,
Yeah.
and those things can cross, absolutely, but like that is just one facet of an entire art form. And so I think folks just they see one example of an art form and they're like, okay, so this is the standard, this is what that is. And so, and especially because I doubt most folks think about video games as like an art form and things like that or a medium in the same way that they think about television and movies, but it is.
Well, it's when you talk to your parents or grandparents and they're like, "Oh, are you going to go play some Pac-Man?"
Yeah.
And you're like, "No, video games have changed a bit."
Dramatically.
Well, and like I think about, when I was growing up, you would walk into Target and had like the girls games display, and like that was an even bigger guarantee that you were going to be mocked because you were already going to be mocked by the girls for playing video games. But if you were playing Cooking Mama, you were going to get made fun of by the boys for playing Cooking Mama.
Yeah.
And Cookie Mama's
You know?
a good game.
Yeah, it is.
It is.
Dumbass boys.
I think I was just laughing at like the reaction to them, but it's a good game.
Well, it makes me
but, like,
mad.
yeah.
Like, stop being stupid. It's a good game.
But so like this sense of, particularly having grown up when I did in the early thousands of like, I have to play the not girly games to be a legitimate gamer. Right.
Yeah, I mean, we've definitely talked about that before, right? Like, are you playing the My Horse Adventure game? Like, that game is, you're almost considered outside of gaming, right?
Yeah.
And it's the
Yeah.
same way that I think people get talked about with mobile stuff
I was
today.
just thinking that. Yep.
Yeah.
I remember, so it wasn't this past time that I went to the conference, but the last time the first time I had gone there, I remember having a conversation, and he was telling me like, yeah, it's something that like I'll have conversations about it with my mother-in-law, and she really just doesn't get it, and like she will say, I'm not a gamer, but she's on like whatever level on like Candy Crush that it's like that's like her the way that she passes her time, and so it's like trying to make her recognize that
That's
Right.
as you playing video games. And I think the other thing is there's a large contingent of people, if your game of choice is Candy Crush, they wouldn't call you a gamer as well, which is a problem. But anyway, like not to necessarily like derail the conversation in terms of taking it a number of different directions, but it's just I am always surprised whenever I didn't watch the Xbox showcase, but the PlayStation, whenever they do theirs, or I'm sure if I watch this one, it's like, none of these are really like, outside of just looking at the name, and I know we'll get there in a little bit, Roblox, I don't know if any of these are like kids games,
Right.
Yeah.
or a game that like if I had a kid, I was like, oh, I'll buy this game for my kid. It's like So I understand why Nintendo consoles are so popular, because can you get enough value out of a PlayStation or an Xbox if you have a 6-year-old?
Well, all my friends with kids have Switches.
Yeah.
Now, they may have something else, but if they have something else, it's because one of the adults wanted it, right?
Yeah.
But if they have young kids, they have a Switch. And, it used to be where you could go buy a PlayStation. Like, you go back to the PlayStation 1, and there's Crash Bandicoot and Spyro, and, you know.
I remember it was the kids who were fighting the PlayStation versus Xbox war, not the adults.
Right. But, like, those games were accessible. And, I mean, you're absolutely right. Like, now you go and you pick up an Xbox, outside of maybe some licensed games, like, there's not a lot there for kids.
Yeah, I think the only other example, and this is not Xbox, but we were talking about it with PlayStation, would be the Little Big Planet games. But I don't know when the last time they made. I think they made.
They haven't made one for the PlayStation 5.
I think they re-released one for the PlayStation 5.
Well, they did that Sackboy game.
Oh, okay, I guess that's the one I'm thinking of.
And that was like right near release or at release, and then
that might have been a
they
launch
have
game.
done nothing else with, But yeah, I mean, the fact that we can count,
Yeah, it's the exception, right? The exception proves the rule type of thing.
we can count on one hand the number of like sort of family-friendly games that PlayStation has made
Yeah.
for this console, which is it's sort of crazy. That's not how it used to work. Yeah, I mean, I think, well, actually, I think that's a big issue for the game industry, because I think like you are, I think they've seeded that market. They feel like they've seeded that market to mobile. And if you're seeding that market to Roblox and Minecraft, I think that you're going to raise up a generation of kids who, when they get of age, they're going to look over at your God of Wars and Last of Us and go, yeah, like we still have Minecraft to play.
Yeah.
Like, who cares?
I do that now. I look and say, I still have Pokemon.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like I have not bought a PlayStation since the PlayStation 2, and the only real reason I want to is for Final Fantasy 7.
Yeah, and and part of me wonders if that's then just like the games that we're making, we should target people with more disposable income. Kids don't have money to buy games. Adults have money to buy games.
If we're making a $300 million Spider-Man game, who do you market that towards?
Yeah. As compared to like the, Spider-Man on the PlayStation or on the Nintendo 64, like those sorts of beat 'em up style games that like are very easy to pick up and play for people who have like a basic sort of video game literacy.
Right. I mean, look, Nintendo tapped into something brilliant with the Wii.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Right? Which was that there were a lot of people who wanted to play games but didn't know how. And what if we could radically simplify the control scheme so that anyone who knew how to swing a tennis racket or a golf club could get up and play? And guess what? Grandma joined in and the little kids joined in and everyone had game nights together. And the problem was they couldn't figure out what to do after Wii Sports. Right? Like they had one brilliant idea and they couldn't figure out where to go after that. And I would say that Nintendo still does a better job of this with things like we've talked about before during the pandemic with Animal Crossing, right? Like that's a game that reaches across all sorts of ages and audiences. And so Nintendo still does that better than anyone else. But it is kind of an unhealthy thing for the industry.
Yeah, it's like a demographic list game.
Yeah.
It's not like we're not hitting on these specific or like these particular tropes that like if somebody outside that are associated with a particular demographic. So if somebody outside of that demographic, like, oh, that's for somebody else, but it's like, oh no, this is just like hits all of those different markets in meaningful ways.
Yeah.
We probably need to move on. Great discussion, but we have a little bit more to cover. Mario, have you been playing anything?
The only thing I really played last week was Castlevania Aria of Sorrow. That's a game I've played a number of times, but I think
Death fight.
Yeah, I was playing with a friend. We were doing, I guess, sort of a race. It's for a little event thing that I'm doing with friends. And there's a way that you can sequence break and get to death early in that game. And so I did that. And that's not a problem. I just didn't buy any healing items. So it was a bit of a struggle. But otherwise, I mean, that's a game that is probably in like my top 5 favorite games, if not just outside of it. So yeah, it's a good game.
Aria of Sorrow was for the DS?
Game Boy Advance.
Game Boy Advance.
Dawn of Sorrow
is the
DS.
sequel.
Yeah, I always get the titles confused because there's like
Dawn
3...
of Sorrow DS.
Yeah, I know that part, but like they...
There were 3 on the Game Boy Advance.
Right, and then 3 on the DS, right?
That sounds right. So the 3 on the Game Boy Advance were Harmony of Dissonance, Aria of Sorrow, and Circle of the Moon. Right. And then on the DS was Dawn of Sorrow, Portrait of Ruin. And I wouldn't be surprised if there's a third one, but I don't know what the name is.
Yeah, I think there is a third one, but my point was just going to be I always get all those games confused.
Sure.
Like I've played several of them, but I still get them all confused because they were pumping them out so quickly. And it's only in hindsight that you look back and go, they were pumping out like fantastic games every single year.
It's pretty incredible. Like all of those games are very good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And like when people talk about the bad one, they're like, it's bad, but it's still better than like 98% of games. You're like, okay, so it's not bad is what you mean. That's cool.
But yeah, other than that, on a whim yesterday, I ended up picking up Helldivers 2 because a friend was talking about it. He's been playing it a lot. And I had talked about it with another friend, and he was like, I don't know if he didn't want to spend the money. And I was like, I can understand that. And then he messaged me back saying, hey, so our other friend has been playing it a lot, and he was asking if the two of us would be interested. And so he said, so if you're still interested, I'm thinking about picking it up. And so I said, okay, I'll pick it up. And so I'm sure we'll be playing that over spring break at a decent amount.
That's something I was hoping to maybe pick up over spring break and actually get into.
Yeah, so I just went through the tutorial. I'm playing it on my laptop, so it's like looks like a PS2 game with all of the settings that I have it playing at, but it plays smoothly. I got to the point where it's playing smoothly, but like the default, it was a PowerPoint trying to play it, but turning all the settings, which is like honestly impressive that like games, the ways that they've developed it, they've recognized, again, we need to hit enough of a market so you can turn all these scalers down. You can, sort of limit your frame rate so that the game is playable and enjoyable in like a smooth way. So
you can run it on a potato.
Yeah. And I don't even think like it's a gaming laptop, but it's still like a few years old now at this point. And so, but yeah, it played through the tutorial, and I'll be looking forward to playing it more.
So let me ask you, have you seen Starship Troopers before?
I have not. I assume I guess you said they haven't made multiple of that movie. I know there's a book from like the 50s or something like that, right?
They made some sequels to it, but the original director's not involved. And
Neil Patrick Harris and Denise Richards.
No, I don't think they're involved. I think Casper Van Dien is in one of the sequels.
No, but they're in the original. That's the movie you're talking about. No, I've never seen it. I know it very much seems, I'm like familiar with it enough to know about it. It very much seems like that's sort of what they're like, the sort of silly over the topness of the, you becoming an arbiter of democracy and stuff like that. But, yeah, it's very silly. I remember when I saw the trailer for the first time, I was like, I don't know what this is, because I had never played the original, but watching enough of it really got me interested. So,
all right, I think that is something I'll try to pick up over break. As for me, I've already talked about Princess Peach is really the only new thing I've played. I played some more Balatro. It is my curse. It is my call in life.
I have also played a lot of Balatro this week, but I figured we've talked enough about it. Yeah. And we're going to talk about it more.
Balatro or Balatro? How do we say it?
I've only ever heard, I was introduced to it as Balatro, so I'm just always going to call it Balatro from now on.
I guess I don't actually know. The game itself doesn't say.
It's a tomato type of thing.
Okay.
But But yeah, Balatro is still out there, still causing trouble. So we'll talk about that here as we move into news. And we're going to start the news with the Xbox Partner Showcase. There were several things shown off as part of this. We're going to kind of just jump around and talk about a few of these. So if any of you want to jump in on any of these. Unknown 9 Awakening is maybe the worst title I've heard.
Is there an unknown 1 through 8?
It's unknown. But like, it is an interesting game. It like kind of shifting around in time and like jumping between different characters that you're controlling. So, you know, it's a third person action game is the way it looked. It looked neat. But, you know, I think as Mario was alluding earlier, like all these games start to look alike and the mechanics all start to kind of blend together. Mm-hmm. And I think that game runs the risk of that, though I will say it at least caught my attention in watching this.
The unknown is just haunting you.
Yeah, it is. Maybe this is straight from that Willy Wonka experience in Glasgow.
Oh,
like
gosh.
the unknown in that, the woman just wearing a silver mask and taunting children. They showed off a game called The Altars. I thought this was one of the most interesting games that they showed. So The Altars looks like one part Death Stranding and one part XCOM, and you are building, you have a spherical spaceship, like literally it's a ring that rolls across this planet, and you have to avoid sunlight each day as like the sun like chases you across the planet, and you have to get out and like collect resources. But the real kicker of that game is you are cloning, I guess, versions of yourself, and they are different versions of yourself that have taken different paths through life. So like the trailer says, what if you didn't drop out of college? What if you didn't break up with your wife? What if you didn't? And these
what if you have a man bun? I'm looking at the picture.
I was looking at the same picture, and you said Death Stranding, and the picture came up, and I was like, oh, that is not the image. I was like, this is just like the bros being dudes right in here in this picture. But
watch the trailer. I think you'll get the Death Stranding reference. Okay. But like, so then you are living and working with these alternate versions of yourself, the altars, and so you're having to balance out. And so like the game trailer is like, the world outside is dangerous, but the world inside may be just as treacherous. And so it's like,
am I going to like commit murder against another version of myself? Like,
well, I mean, the implication seemed to be, it would be like who, like, can you trust yourself?
Who survives? Me.
Which is the dark version or the darkest version of yourself. That premise was pretty cool. That game had a lot of interesting things going on in the trailer. It'll be interesting to see how that all pans out into an actual game, right? Like, it sounds cool, it has cool pieces, but whether any of that comes together to make a neat game to actually play is, something else entirely. But that was maybe the game that like really grabbed me the most. Creatures of Ava looked a little sort of like Power World. Roblox announced. So this was a weird trailer because when it came on, I was like, this game looks like trash. What is this game? And then it popped up and it was like, is Roblox? And I was like, well, that explains it. And so then they were like, is Roblox Griefville? And I was like, okay, that sounds like a horrible place to live, Griefville. And then they were like, look who's here, Chucky. And I was like, okay, well, that's cool. That's the coolest thing this trailer has showed me so far.
I'm having more flashbacks to the Pop Funko game trailer.
Yeah. So, they're putting Chucky into Roblox.
Is Roblox not a kid's game?
Yeah, it is.
But but
it's
Roblox
child's
is also
play, Christina.
Listen,
it's child's play.
Listen,
we talked about this, a year ago, 7 months ago at this point. they're adding like a dating sim, not dating sim.
yeah!
There's like a
I forgot
Roblox
about
dating
that.
site or something like that.
I forgot about that. You're right.
That's true. They're adding like Tinder-like functions into Roblox.
Yeah.
No.
So
But not for kids. You have to be 18 or over.
But
Because obviously they can verify
I was
that.
about to say, like, I was under 18 in a lot of adult-only chat rooms back in the day. Like, and listen, Chucky, I watched it when I was like 6 or 7, and I had nightmares about the. It wasn't Good Guys. That's the what
That's
Chucky
the doll.
Yeah, but it was whatever the equivalent was that they were based on. I had little sister. That's what it was. It was little brother and little sister. I had a little sister. As soon as I saw that movie, I took my rocking chair outside, and then I put the little sister in it, and I was like, please take her away. I put a sign on her chest because she's gonna eat me.
I wish I knew what episode to tell you to listen to hear OJ's story about Chucky, because
my brother bought one of those full-size Chucky dolls. After showing his kids Child's Play, he went out and bought one of those dolls, and then he would set it at the end of the hallway in their house. And he said the kids were getting up all night, running back and forth and doing stuff, and he said none of them move anymore.
it was a traumatic Elf on the Shelf situation.
Chucky in the hall.
I think the kids today are built different, though.
Yeah.
So I think they'll be fine with Chucky.
I mean,
at least Roblox version of Chucky.
I was just thinking of when they added Chucky into DVD, they also had the original actor and then Jennifer Tilly do voice lines.
You'd mentioned that.
And what he says, like, is very adult themed. Like, and if you watch the Child's Play, like, the stuff that character says is rated a certain level, right? And so I guess, but that also like helps to make up that character. And so I'm trying to think of.
Have you seen the new series?
Yes.
So like one of my favorite parts of that new series is they encounter a character. The character's gay, I think, right?
Uh-huh.
And the kid asks Chucky. He says, "Doesn't that bother you?"
Like, my son's gay.
And he's like, "I'm not a monster."
Honestly, the new series is really great if you like campy horror, because it definitely took it back to the camp. But I don't know, putting that in it.
It kind of feels like putting Chucky in Roblox is doing exactly what we were just talking about, where it's like, this is one of the few kid-friendly games, and we're going to legitimize it, quote unquote.
Well, I mean, I don't know if I would say Chucky legitimizes
Well, like, make it
it,
more
but I
mature.
do know what you're saying. I do know what
Make
you're
it
saying.
more mature.
Make it more appealing to adults, I think. Or, I don't know. I don't want to play it. And I'm a big fan of horror, and I do not want to play it. But somebody might.
I feel like now we have to make this like a video. We have to like lock Christina in a room, and she has to play Roblox Chucky.
Oh no.
We'll stream it.
No.
No, we have to get her in there telling her that Mikey Myers is in there.
Listen. I would go.
Listen, she's not into men, but she'll make an exception.
Oh my gosh.
Let's see. They showed off a trailer for the Sinking City 2 for Final Fantasy XIV Online, which is finally coming to Xbox after
How many years?
decade.
I will say I did just learn from my sister about Final Fantasy XIV. You know, they had an event with 4 fiends with Scarmelia and, oh my gosh, I can't remember the water one's name, Barabashia and Rubicante. And the song that they play during the Rubicante fight is entirely based on a meme song. To the point, Hyodane is the composer who created that meme song, and he also helped compose this new one to make it match his original arrangement. So that's delightful. But
That's neat. I mean, OJ is huge into Final Fantasy 14 Online, so and,
So is my sister.
and OJ has that new Xbox that they
Courtesy of Justin's great deal of the week.
Oh, now that they're making adult money.
Let's see. They showed off Stalker Legends of the Zone trilogy. So this is the original Stalker game, and I guess those are sequels or expansions. I didn't really understand, but they're combining all three of those. And the thing that was really interesting is that is for the Xbox One and PlayStation 4. So apparently they could run them well enough on those so that they could put them out and they'll be backwards compatible with the new systems. So I guess they get that wider market to sell those games to, which is kind of neat. They showed off a game called Monster Jam Showdown, which is a monster truck racing game, which is like the most 2002 game you can imagine.
Mario's just shaking his head right now.
There's nothing good about a monster truck racing game.
Listen,
Is this more of your trauma from the
I was
N64?
supposed to say,
Monster truck madness. I feel like I've talked about it enough on this show, but they're not meant to race each other.
maybe
The best
that's,
part about Monster Truck Madness is you get a power up that turns you into a helicopter, so you don't have to be a monster truck anymore. The game you can actually control the
maybe this
vehicle.
is the game for kids though, because I remember being 3 years old and being stoked to go to a monster truck show.
But if they're racing
feel
each other,
like-
they're not even destroying each other
I
like they're
feel
supposed
like-
to.
I just like the
If
big
they were to
truck.
make a monster truck game, which I don't have any just make it like the monster truck rally. Make it like the demolition derby type of thing.
Yeah, you gotta be
as compared
destroying
to
each other.
The I'm trying to control this behemoth of a vehicle. I'm sorry.
Don't sugarcoat it, Mario. Tell us how you really feel.
The game is
this-
so bad.
Is this your rabbits are dying? What? But like monster trucks should not be a gay, or you said
I
it
don't-
should.
I don't, like I said, I think I don't have any problems with monster trucks. It's just when you race them in a video game.
Yeah, sure, Mario. Like, that's the
I'm
way
gonna
people.
So
That's the way people always talk about things they don't like. I don't have a problem with those people. I just don't know why they have to get over here.
Oh, man. Oh,
Don't
Justin
put-
went from 0 to 80. Really?
I don't think that's how I was saying it at all.
I don't have a problem with those monster trucks.
Just as long as they're not racing each other.
They should have their own races.
They can the monster trucks. Give me like an Animal Crossing monster trucks where they exist harmoniously amongst one another
On their own island, away from me.
All right, so it's about I don't even know when it is, but so here we're doing Eclipse Con. You know, they do like last year was the Saluki Con, and this year is Eclipse Con, and so I'll be organizing the Gamer Lounge in sort of conjunction with the Rainbow Cafe, and last year I brought the Nintendo 64 and we played it. You all will come and you all will play Monster Truck Madness.
Let's go.
And I will feel vindicated because there's no way any of you will enjoy that experience. Justin over here, yeah, and then he's like, okay, I apologize.
Am I allowed to enjoy watching other people play it?
That's the only way you can enjoy it.
I'm ready.
Let's do it.
My
Special
body is
episode.
ready.
I mean, I love monster trucks.
Okay, all right, bet.
Bigfoot,
Bet.
grave digger. Remember when they made a monster truck of Goldberg and it had arms?
That was one of my favorites.
I have nothing against the aesthetic of monster trucks. If anything, that's why I'm so disappointed in that game. 'Cause there's so much potential there.
Yeah.
All right.
No, I'm with you. Demolition Derby monster truck game. Absolutely.
There you have it, folks, from noted monster truck hater, Mario Sanders. They showed off a little bit of the Persona 3 Reload expansion pass. So that is the remake of Persona 3. They're putting out an expansion pass for it, which is going to culminate with the original expansion that they've completely remade coming out this fall. But in between now and then, there's going to be some costumes and other items that are being released.
As I say, is this them adding like the Fez content?
Is the Aegis?
I don't know.
Is what it's called. I don't know more about it.
Yeah, so they always do like the original game and then the re-release. So like for Persona 5, it was Persona 5 and then Persona 5 Royal.
And Golden for 4.
Yeah, and then 3 had Festival. And then obviously they had the portable one, so I didn't know if that was this sort of adding in the festival content.
I think
You
this
said
is some of that
Fez.
content.
You said Fez, and I was picturing like the hat.
The little-
Fez.
the little
His Fezes are cool.
Twirly guy.
No, I was picturing like the red cap.
Let's see. They showed off a game called The First Berserker Kazan. I couldn't tell you anything about this game having watched it. They did show off a game called Tales of Kinzara Zao. They've shown this before. This is a Metroidvania style game, but with an sort of African aesthetic to it. And that game looks really cool. Like it has a cool Metroid vibe to it. It looks like a Metroidvania that leans into the Metroid side of that. And it's very bright and colorful and just has a really cool aesthetic. That's one of the games I came out of this actually excited to play. They showed off a trailer for Frostpunk 2, and then the last game was Kunitsugami Path of the Goddess. This is Capcom's game, which looks sort of like a spiritual successor to Okami, the dog Zelda game. I don't know how else to describe that game. And so it has a lot of that kind of look to it. But this also apparently from this trailer has some real-time strategy segments in it, which looked interesting. But they were very quick that they showed those. I think this game looks really cool. I don't know how to play, obviously. But it actually got me excited because like the more they showed this game, the cooler the game looks. At least it has a cool look to it, a cool aesthetic. And Capcom has been hitting it out of the park lately. Everything Capcom touches lately has been great. So I am excited to try that one out. That does it for the partner showcase. But Microsoft had some more news this morning. It said it has been hacked by Russian-backed operatives, and that they have accessed source code from Microsoft. This story, I believe, is still developing. They said that they have particular segments of Microsoft have particularly been hammered by these people trying to gain access to systems. This is not necessarily directly video game related, but obviously anytime a hack like this happens, it's hitting Microsoft. It could potentially affect the video games area. But obviously the bigger target, if you're a hacker, is Windows, which is where, a huge amount of games are played as well. So that's a developing story. We'll probably be talking about that again over the next few weeks, but I did want to throw it in here. Mario mentioned earlier we were going to talk more about Balatro or Balatro, however you prefer to say it. It was this week pulled from some stores due to some shenanigans with the age rating. So apparently in some territories, the age rating agencies, so like we think of the ESRB, but there's different groups around the world that do these age ratings. So PEGI in Europe is the name of the group. Apparently some of those took a second look at the game and are like, hey, this is gambling focused. So they took a second look, but that second look was very broad and not like paying much attention. And when they did that, they said, hey, this is a gambling focused game. You can't be an age 3 and up. This has to be an adult game. And so they raised that rating, which then Balatro was being sold in marketplaces as accessible to all ages, so they just pulled the entire game. Which, when you're a small indie developer and you have a big hit on your hands, and all of a sudden people start pulling your game, it must be like just a state of panic that you're in.
Yeah.
Because like you want to capitalize on this as much as you possibly can while everyone's playing and talking about this game. One thing that was kind of interesting about this, the developer did come out as part of this and was like, hey, I made this game because I'm anti-gambling and there's like no real gambling in the game. This is sort of an alternative to playing real poker. It's just using some of the, rules and aesthetics, but you're not actually gambling anything in doing it.
Because you're not even really, like, the first level you're kind of playing, or until you get an actual joker, you're kind of playing, or you are playing real poker. But once you get a joker in the game, like, it's... Go ahead.
No,
sorry.
I was going to interrupt you. I'm sorry.
Oh, it shifts. That was all I was going to say.
Well, I guess, and that's where I was like, yeah, I think where you can clearly see, again, yes, I can understand it for like the aesthetic of, sort of gambling and poker, but the fact that there's no real loss, like you don't have to put something in order to get something back, right?
Well, and also they could have, instead of calling it money, they could have called it anything else. It's just game currency, which is in a lot of games.
Yeah. Go ahead.
It's interesting because I look at the early Pokemon games having the game corner and like the slot machines, and there you are putting in coins and winning coins out, but
like you are actually gambling in that in that sense.
And so like I'm very used to like that kind of stuff being cut. So like I look at this, having not played Balatro, having not watched anyone play Balatro, and be like, yeah, it doesn't surprise me that Nintendo and that everywhere would look at gambling rules in Europe, gambling rules in South Korea, and be like, we're just gonna play it safe.
Yeah, I mean,
it's absolutely disappointing because, like you guys said, it's not a gambling game. But
it's weird for them to have this panic and like not correct it quicker.
Yeah.
So I posted something in the group chat that was like, I can't tell like if the folks who banned this really just don't know anything about game theory, or if all puzzle games make you better at poker. Because I was sitting there watching someone play it and going, this is just a strategy game. It's another strategy game. Which, granted, if you are number count, or if you're card counting in poker, yeah, but it goes so much further and deeper than that, I guess. So it's obvious that the people who looked at this, it was what you said, Mario, just aesthetic.
Yeah, well, that's what it's like. I mean, I think about it in a sense of like, yeah, there are definitely times where I'm like playing probabilities in the game of like, I've got 2 pair, but I know I've got 2 more 7s in the deck. So
but you
if
can
I toss,
look at your deck.
and that's what I'm saying. So I can toss and like I can say like, and there are 20 cards left, so I got a whatever percentage chance of like pulling one of those, But it's like that to me is not gambling. Like, okay, you lose your run if you don't pull the 7.
Right,
you're like,
right.
all right, and then I press new run and we start over again. But so I'm not surprised, but at the same time, I feel like there are games that do what they're saying Balatro does in more egregious ways, but would probably not be punished the same way because it doesn't have the aesthetic of it.
Agreed.
Yeah, it's very much a surface level decision, and it's disappointing, and it's not surprising.
In more disappointing news,
This one.
the Peoria, Illinois Police Department put out a recruitment ad on social media that used the aesthetic of Call of Duty and asked local residents to answer the Call of Duty in the
Stop
font.
playing games and answer the Call of Duty.
Yeah, so this poster that they put out has the Call of Duty part in the font from the game, and then it has 3 police officers with their guns in tactical gear with their guns out pointed to sort of recreate the look of a Call of Duty cover, but with cops instead of with soldiers. So they put this out. There was an immediate backlash. They have come out. They pulled it off their social media, and they've put out an apology. But yeah, this is, and I mean, I think the problem with this, right, like, is we're in an era where the militarization of the police is a big concern by lots of people for lots of reasons. And when you see something like this, you're like, well, you guys don't even get it. You don't even get the concerns that people have. You're leaning into the concerns that people have.
Or they try to say that it's not happening, but then utilize militaristic games / aesthetics in order to recruit.
Yeah. Yeah. It's just, everything about it screams that, like, this was something that they planned to do in, like, 2007, and then it got shelved, and somebody came in now and was like, hey, let's do it now. And they're like, that's a great idea.
See, I don't know. I think, based on having conversations with folks like this, that they just were so clueless they didn't get it. And honestly, some of them are probably confused as to why they're being told to pull it. I guarantee you.
No, I think you're absolutely right. Yeah. I think they don't see the issue with it.
That we're trying to recruit young folks. Why wouldn't we use something that a lot of them are interested in to do that? Because they don't hear the concerns. Like, they don't understand. They don't get the gravity of it, right? Of what exactly that means.
And even just the idea of linking the job of police work to a game. Right? Like, that there's anything game related, particularly a Call of Duty game, which is basically a straight shooter beginning to end.
Well, that's what screams 2007 to me, is like that to me was very much an era of, like, oh, you know, these war games are recruitment tools for the military and all that.
Right. There's just no nuance to it.
Yeah.
And I mean, you know, so, like, you start thinking like, well, it made me immediately think of Battlefield Hardline, which was, they took the Battlefield franchise, and in between major releases, they said, well, we're going to put out this little sort of side release game. And that side release game was taking the Battlefield engine and making a cops and robbers game out of it. And you're like, you're taking a military shooter and putting cops into it, which is off-putting to a lot of people. Like, and hey, like, I don't hate all cops. Like, I understand why some people are in that position, but, like, I have known police officers who I thought were good people and, like, were trying to do a good job. But, like, when you look at something like this, I think it's hard not to go, well, you know, like, should that be the first way that we think of a police officer?
Yeah. As,
like, a first-person shooter? Whether it's Battlefield Hardline or it's this Call of Duty ad, is that the way we should be thinking of police officers? Right? That's not keeping the peace. That's killing somebody.
It's right. Those games are see person, shoot person.
Yes.
Yeah.
And yeah.
There's no nuance. They're not even police quests from like 30 years ago.
Yeah. Well, and the arguments that we're getting from police officers who are trying to say, you know, not all police officers, are that there is more to policing than that. This feeds into that stereotype, like Justin said earlier.
Yeah.
And so
I absolutely agree. They are not doing themselves any favors.
No, not at all. Because you know, it's Call of Duty, things like that, you have pretty clear enemies, right? Who are the enemies when cops pretend to be the shooters, right? It's anyone that they deem scary, that they deem enemies, basically. And so
and
just
cops shouldn't
dangerous.
be thinking in terms of
Exactly.
enemies, right?
Exactly.
Like, nobody is the cop's enemy.
Yes.
Like, I mean, we can talk about like, oh, well, you know, do they sometimes need to use their weapon? Okay, but like, that person's still not, like, you associating that person with enemy is a very dangerous road to go down. Because it immediately, I think you're right, like, it immediately starts to color the way that you view the world, right? Like, here are the good guys, there are the bad guys, which is what video games do, but they're video games.
Yeah.
But, you know, like, I mean, this is a conversation that people have had about Call of Duty. Like, here's, you know, how do you make a Call of Duty game that doesn't take you out into the desert and have you shoot a bunch of brown people? Right? And so, like, the Call of Duty games have tried really hard to be like, oh, no, this is like a Russian terrorist, like, group that has broken off from Russia. It's not actual Russia. Or this is an American group of generals that have broken out and want to, like, overthrow the government, right? Which I appreciate them trying to do that and, like, be more, quote unquote, politically correct with it. But when you're a police officer and you're taking that imagery, right? Like, and then you're putting that into what your job is.
Yeah. There's such a...
That's interacting with regular people.
Yeah.
Yeah. There's such a strong connotation that it just seems like there was no one on the team who recognized the connotations to catch it before it ever made it out.
Yeah, definitely. So they did apologize. You know, whether or not, of course, people apologize all the time with not really understanding. It's like when your cat looks at you with those, like, sad eyes and you're like, you don't actually know what you did wrong. Or you don't care.
It's easier to forgive my cat.
Fair. Let's see. WB, as part of a investor talk, said they plan to double down on live service, mobile, and free-to-play games, kind of in place of big single-player AAA games, which is a really weird thing because their live service Suicide Squad game just bombed horribly.
I was gonna say, did they make the Kill the Justice League game?
Yes.
Okay.
And then the best-selling game of last year was their single-player only Hogwarts Legacy game. So their last year of putting out games is the exact opposite of what they're doubling down on.
WB, why, bro?
Why, bro?
I mean, you want to know why? It is that Roblox.
Yeah.
Sorry. Oh, no, go ahead.
I was just say it's the fact that if we can nail the free to play mobile game, that's going to make so much more money than even the Hogwarts Legacy for as much as it sold. If we could make a Hogwarts Legacy, you know, live service game that, like, people can, like, roam around and do this forever, yeah, that's going to make so much sense. Like, I get it. I get the logic, but it does feel like a, you know, it's the go back to gambling of, you know, I'm going to take this 10% chance at $1 billion when you got a 50% chance at $1 million right in front of you.
Yeah.
Well, and it's funny because they've tried this, right? So they made that Hogwarts Pokemon style go.
Did they make that one? Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, well,
Was that? I thought that was also Niantic.
It is Niantic, but Warner Brothers obviously like leased out the property, right? So that was, and so when you look at it, they've tried this, and of all those Pokemon Go clones, that was the surest bet, right? Like that was the one that should have taken off. You're gonna make a Pokemon Go clone with Harry Potter? That sounds like it has even a broader audience than Pokemon Go. And then that didn't work.
I'll say I think that of the big Pokemon Go-esque games, it's Pokemon Go, the Hogwarts one, and Pikmin Bloom. Pokemon Go and Pikmin Bloom are still available. The Hogwarts one is dead.
Yeah. So, like, I mean, even when you take a big property like Harry Potter, that doesn't guarantee success with one of those games. I mean, which is what you're saying. Like, just because you see Roblox and you see, you know, Minecraft and Fortnite doesn't mean that you can replicate that.
Well, and it's funny because honestly, if you had to, and maybe this is just like, you know, me being the generation that I am, if you had to say, pick a franchise, you know, sort of like you have to be successful, pick a franchise that I think it might be Harry Potter.
Yeah.
Like as the best bet to be successful with a live action game.
I mean, think of how successful it is in spite of
Yeah, and like
what's going on now.
yeah, that or like maybe Marvel, but we've talked about the pitfalls of like a superhero live action game because you want to play as the superhero.
Well, and they did that with that Avengers game. That was a live service
Yeah.
game, and that bombed, right? And now DC just had their bomb with the Suicide Squad game, right? So, like, even taking the biggest IP in the world doesn't guarantee success. Like, people are looking for good games,
Yeah.
and like making one of those live service free to play games that's actually successful is like way harder than I think a lot of these executives understand.
Especially getting one that like gains long-term traction.
Yeah.
You can make a game that's the flavor of the month, but having something that has legs is not easy.
Well, we talked about it. Was it last week about EA and how EA is like cutting back from these licensed properties, and at the same time they're doing this as Apex Legends apparently is continuing to just lose players, right? And so when you talk about that flavor of the month, that game blew up. That game was huge, but it can't sustain it at the same like length of time, at the same popularity that things like, again, Minecraft or Fortnite have managed. I mean, nobody can except those games.
Right? Like Apex probably would belong to like the 1% in terms of like most successful of those types of games, and it is still, bleeding players.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's really interesting. Let's see. Some happier news. MLB The Show is going to add female players. So you can create a woman in MLB The Show, their new game that's coming out, I guess this month, and this
Makes
month
sense
or
if
early
they're-
next month.
I mean, it makes sense for March Women's History Month. Add female players now.
So this is the first time that they've had female players. Obviously, like NBA 2K has added the WNBA. So like, this is not unheard of in professional sports games. My big disappointment in this announcement is no Rockford Peaches, which to me, if you're going to add women to a baseball game, you have to go out and get that license for
I want
a
to be
league of their
Dottie
own.
Henson so bad.
I mean, like, even if you couldn't get the likenesses of Gina Davis and Madonna and Rosie O'Donnell, right? Like, even if you couldn't get their likenesses, if you could get the names in there,
Yeah.
and like, I mean,
Well, they just didn't they just like reboot that into a series or something
Yeah,
like
they
that
did.
as well?
Yeah.
I don't know if it was good or not,
It was
but
so good.
I know it had
It was
the
real gay.
gal from Broad City in it, I think.
Who
right, Abby
Abby
Jacobson.
who honestly just played herself. Like, she
okay.
does not have range. So imagine Abby from Broad City as a Rockford Peach, and you pretty much got it. But despite that, it was so good.
So, I mean, I just feel like that film carries so much weight. If you're going to like do something about women in baseball, I
Yeah.
feel like
Sure,
you kind of have to lean into that film a bit.
Yeah. Even just giving it a nod, like even if
Even the uniforms.
the uniforms,
Right.
or even if like you just are able to put up advertisements in the stadium
Oh,
in
yeah,
the
yeah.
game.
So, I mean, there is a historical mode to MLB The Show that lets you play on old ballparks and stuff. So
Yeah.
maybe there's something in there. They just haven't announced it. Maybe they'll add something in the future. I just feel like for me, that would get me to play that mode,
Yeah.
Yeah.
right? Like, and I would play like with those characters and those teams.
Yeah.
Yeah. It feels like the kind of thing they're holding on to for DLC, and it should be a release thing because it'll get
Maybe.
people.
I mean, it may just be like it's too expensive to get the rights to that, but we'll see.
Yeah.
Let's see. Quest headsets, Meta Quest headsets, the VR headsets stopped working this last week when Facebook went down. And this has angered a lot of users who are like, hey, why does our headset not work just because your servers went down? Isn't this headset offline? What's going on? To which I don't think Facebook has made any sort of statements, just kind of shrugged back at them.
Outside the meme of Zuckerberg being like, you better calm down back there and I'll shut it off again.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. that MetaQuest, those headsets should be far more successful than they are. And I think it's a testament to like the quality of the hardware that they're as successful as they are, because in every other way, Facebook continues to botch this. And you kind of just feel like, can you just sell it off to somebody who knows what they're doing?
Yeah.
I can never keep any of the names straight. Is that the one that you have?
Yeah, this is the one that's fully contained. Like, it doesn't have to be attached to anything. So it's the one they've put out 3 different ones now, plus the Pro. It's the one that most people have, the little white one.
That's what I think. Like I said, I know there are multiple different iterations, and I could just never keep them distinguishable from one another.
Yeah, it is by far the most like popular VR headset out there. Let's see. So a few weeks ago we talked about how the new it's not NCAA, it's the EA Sports college football game. It doesn't have the NCAA license or something, but that they are going to pay players $600 and a copy of the game for their name, image, and likeness, since they can now actually pay players directly. So this past week, Arch Manning, who is the nephew, I believe, of Eli and Peyton.
Yes.
He's the quarterback at the University of Texas. He was the first, I guess, big player to come out and be like, no, I'm declining this. I'm not opting into it, which is...
Honestly, I'm not surprised coming from Texas, simply because, like, they sort of have their own monopoly on the Texas names and things like that, like having their own station, which not station, but like a channel basically, which ended up, that's why so many folks in the Big 12, or Big 10, 12, no, 12, UNL was 10, Big 12, like ended up going other places, is because Texas monopolized a lot of like how things got broadcasted. And so I have no doubt that he was told to decline it. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know how that works or anything. It's, we talked about this. Would players decline it, or would everyone just kind of go along with it? Because, hey, you're getting $600 and you're getting to be in a video game, which is kind of exciting. But like we talked about at the time, the pay is not something astonishing. It's $600.
He is also somebody who $600 is not going to go a long way for,
Exactly.
right? Like his grandfather is a well-known professional football player, both of his uncles or incredibly successful, probably future Hall of Fame football players.
He doesn't need $600.
Yeah, $600 is not going, and really, that's not going to move it for him.
And we kind of talked about that, of how like $600 plus a copy of the game doesn't feel like a lot, and it certainly wouldn't be that to a player like him, I think.
Yeah. So let's see. In other WB related news, they're shutting down Rooster Teeth. So Rooster Teeth was a collection of people who did podcasts and streaming about video games. I guess their most famous property is the Red versus Blue series.
Yeah. They're getting shut down?
Yeah. So,
WB, why, bro?
Why does WB do anything lately? Why do they shelve the Wile E. Coyote movie? Because they can save money this way. I mean, this probably goes back. I don't know the financials of Rooster Teeth. I am imagining they were profitable at some level. But this goes back to what I've heard multiple times from different people who are well-versed in how these sort of corporations work, that they look at something like Rooster Teeth and they say, hey, we're putting $10 million a year into this, and we're generating $1 million in profit, $2 million in profit. I'm making these numbers up.
Yeah.
That $10 million, if we took it and invested it somewhere else, might return $10 million, $20 million to us. So even though this is profitable, it's not profitable enough to make it worth us fooling with it and keeping at it. That's my guess what this comes down to.
Yeah.
More than anything.
It's all numbers.
I mean,
that's a bummer.
There have been some problems with some of the staff members at Rooster Teeth, is my understanding. some sexual issues going on with a couple of them. One of them that was apparently using their position to engage sexually with fans. So that could have made it easier, but I don't think that was the reasoning.
Yeah.
And in some final sad news, Akira Toriyama passed away March 1st at 68. This news actually just came out, I guess, yesterday, even though he had passed away several days ago. Akira Toriyama is one of those names that if you're into nerdy stuff, you probably already know the name, but you might not know the full significance. So he is the creator of the Dragon Ball manga. And then as far as video games, he did the character designs for Dragon's Quest and Chrono Trigger and Blue Dragon. That's a very short resume. His resume is much longer than that. But just to give you a brief summary, this is somebody who's hugely influential in anime, in manga, in video games, and I would say broadly in nerd culture beyond that, because his character designs have been the inspiration for lots of others.
And it's so iconic when you see it. The cell shading that's in it, the way that he draws his character, or the way that the characters were drawn, like it's iconic.
Yeah, he has a style that's like that's Toriyama was involved with this one for sure.
I saw a meme this morning on Facebook that was like, sending Toriyama energy is free, and it's a snapshot of like I want to say it's Dragon Ball Z, where Goku is like trying to defeat one of them, and they're all sending energy up in the air, and I was like, I loved that show when I was young.
Yeah, I know. It's like there's a legend right here that we just lost, and it's like, man. Life's too short. I mean, 68, that's really young.
Yeah, I mean, it is. And I think that's the thing that's kind of striking is he was still a fairly young man. And, it's obviously a great loss to multiple different industries. Pour one out for Akira, and go play one of his games. Go watch some of his anime. Go read some of his manga as tribute. All right, that does it for news. Let's move on to our big question. And so I believe, Alicia, you alluded earlier that it's Women's History Month, but today specifically, March 8th, is International Women's Day. So we'd be remiss if we didn't do something related to this. So our question for today is, sort of just a broad question, but like, who's an important woman in gaming to you? And so this could be somebody who works behind the scenes. This could be somebody who covers video games. This could be a character in a game, but I think on International Women's Day, it's kind of worthwhile to like single out some women who are important in games. Christina, why don't we start with you?
Yeah, the first name that I put was Peach.
The most important woman in games.
Well, since we were talking about Peach, she's been on my mind, and Peach is preferable anyway. The one.
Do you think Peach shows up in Showtime?
Dear God, I hope so. That
would elevate it to a 10 out of 10.
Exactly.
Is that who Grape is? Is she going to pull that mask off?
That's Peach. I hope so, because again, that would show that she's the queer icon we all wanted her to be. But I think the woman that I always think of when I think of gaming is Anita Sarkeesian, just for sort of being brave enough to say what so many of us had been thinking, and doubling down and making the videos. And I know that she got so many death threats for and a lot of people pointed to her for that whole Gamergate situation,
Right.
or at least starting it. And so
the blowback against her starting it.
Yes. And so while some people may point to her as being like a troublemaker in all of this, like to me, it took a lot of bravery to say things that were pretty easy to say. It's kind of like when you were talking about Mario, when you were talking about Kyle yesterday in my class, the thing about like having the bravery to do the ordinary things or to point out the ordinary things. The fact that this was happening so much, and I'm sure she knew that it was going to be a problem saying things about it, but I'm sure she didn't realize the type of blowback that she was going to get. And I think that that's something that we are still dealing with. It's definitely gotten better, but it's certainly not over. And so she's someone I always think of when I think of women in gaming.
I think one of the things that was so insane about that is you would read people who would be like, well, she got this detail wrong about this game. And you were like, okay, well, you can say that. And they were like, fuck her, she should die.
Yes.
And you were like, what? Like, how'd you go from 0 to 100? I mean,
Exactly.
it was like talking about like monster trucks with Mario. Like, they went from 0 to 100 like a monster truck barreling down the highway.
Monster truck could never go 100. Or like 0 to 7.
Again, Mario, just like with the slander on monster trucks. But like that was what always got me about it, because I was like, okay, if you want to criticize her knowledge level about games and like, is she getting these details correct and everything, you're being a bit pedantic.
Yeah.
But like, you can do that.
Like there are things you could legitimately critique about that series of videos,
Sure.
but like to the extent that they got critiqued and the way that she personally got attacked,
Yes.
it was
Yeah.
Well,
insane.
There's definitely like you said, there's room for criticism and there's room for conversation.
and I'm sure she would welcome like
Yeah.
legitimate criticism.
That's
Yeah.
I think the thing is, like, ultimately the examples that she was picking out pointed to the toxic masculinity that was like in games. So
Which brought out the toxic masculinity.
Exactly. Like, by critiquing her in that way and not trying to see her videos, they saw her videos as an attack as opposed to like the start of a dialogue or a conversation. And so then, they basically proved her right, even though, again,
even though no one wanted them to, her included, I'm sure. She did not want them to prove her right.
Again, I don't think, I think she knew that it was going to ruffle feathers. I don't think she realized, like, folks were going to say that she should die or that she should be SA'd or anything like that.
Yeah.
No, like, I mean, like, I think what she went through wasn't worth what, any sort of like benefit she got at the end of all that, right? Like the name recognition and, all that, certainly not worth what she had to go through to get there. And it was just insane, right? Like, yeah, you can absolutely disagree with her, but like, you can't attack her and you certainly can't threaten her.
Yep.
No.
Yeah, and I will say that wasn't the start of it. There was with Zoe Quinn,
Right.
like that was really the start of it, and that she just sort of got lumped into that whole conversation. But so like that's where like I don't even feel like it's fair to say like, it wasn't worth it for her, because like that was just something that she was doing for other aspects of media as well, and it was more of like a wrong place, wrong time. Like, this is where this whole, like, everything was bubbling under the surface and it exploded. And she more just got caught in the crosshairs of it all as well.
But I think it's important to note, like, she's not the only woman
No.
For sure.
critiquing games who has been caught in that crossfire.
Absolutely not.
So Voidburger, who for a while worked with Giant Bomb, like the amount of criticism that she took for criticizing some horror games, because she's like real big into like horror games and streaming that sort of stuff. And like particularly she criticized Bloober Team and like some of the like stuff that they have put into their games dealing with, I think it was with the mental health aspects. And like people went nuts. And like in fairness, video game players are really bad at controlling themselves. And so certainly there are male critics who have taken like some insane blowback, but it is always amplified more for women.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Never. Yeah. I don't think I've ever seen it to that, the extent that Anita Sarkeesian or Zoe Quinn or Brianna Wu
Like
received
the
it.
threats against their body for
Yeah.
stuff like that, I think is like that bright line
Yeah.
of going.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like you can be passionate about these games. You can certainly feel like you are right and want to argue that, but like when it gets to the point of like threatening them, it blows my mind that people think that that's acceptable.
Yeah. Alicia, how about you?
So I went the character route.
Okay.
And I kind of have two pairs of answers, but one of them is kind of more of an honorable mention shout out. I do have to shout out Crystal in Pokemon Crystal and May in the Ruby Sapphire Emerald games for the fact that they were Crystal was the first time that I remember a game that I played having, hey, you can pick and be it's a self-insert and you can pick and be a girl. And then May was the first time that it made any difference whatsoever. And, very little difference, just the difference of, okay, now your rival is Brendan and you're fighting against him rather than if you play as Brendan, then your rival's May and you're fighting against her.
Right.
But the fact that those were the first times that I remember being able to actually put myself as the self-insert character was huge. So shout out to them. But also they are self-insert characters and have fan-developed personalities, but aren't really given much of personality in the game itself. So the real pair that I want to focus on is actually Tifa and Aerith in Final Fantasy VII, because that when I first played that game, again, growing up when I did, the communities that I was part of very much was a world of strong woman equals no emotions except anger, not like other girls, whatever. And so like going into that game and seeing, okay, Tifa's a martial artist, Aerith is a florist who wears pink, like the expectation is that like Tifa would be the badass hard-nosed, not like other girls, and Aerith would be all frilly and girly. And the fact that that's not the case, Tifa is the one who is very gentle and Aerith is sassy, and the fact that even though there is that love triangle with Cloud, the fact that the two of them don't hate each other and become like best friends, especially growing up, that was not something I got to see a lot. Every time that you saw a love triangle, the girls hated each other. And every time that you saw, if they ever, really, I'm losing my words because
it's like a tomboy and a hyperfemme, and usually the hyperfemme is like, and then tomboy is the one that like gets stuff done, and they reversed it.
Yeah, they completely reversed it without making, and just the fact that also Tifa is the character that got my sister into all of this and was like really our introduction to everything. My sister made friends with a group of people who all had given themselves Kingdom Hearts characters, and since she was a late edition, they were like, oh, well, Tifa shows up in Kingdom Hearts 2, so you can be Tifa. And that was like how we got started getting into Kingdom Hearts and Final Fantasy and all of that. And so, and just the fact that it's very much from a time where you didn't see a lot of positive female friendships.
Right.
And that we get to see such a positive female friendship between the two of them, and the love triangle doesn't destroy that.
Well, the love triangle isn't defining of their characters.
Yeah.
Right? It's something
It's-
that happens in the game, but it's not who they are.
Yeah.
And it's always something that's been more important to fans than to the actual game.
Right.
Yeah, I think the fact that they are like nuanced characters in the ways that they can represent, it's sort of going back to this conversation of a strong female character was always this, and this. The fact that they can be that and not that at the same time, like it's like that's how real people are. Real people are complex and nuanced, and there's like, while there's aspects of what we might call like a softness, there's also a lot of strength in that softness as well. And so, yeah, I think those are great answers.
Yeah, like you would look at that game and think, okay, Tifa's going to be the man with boobs character and Aerith's going to be the squealing, crier. And it's like, neither of them are that.
Neither of them are men with boobs.
Right. Well, I mean, we mentioned Joss Whedon earlier, and Joss Whedon famously, when they asked him one time, "How do you write women?" He was like, "I write them the same way I write men." And like,
well, and that was so much of the early thousands. I very much grew up with the idea of strong woman equals man with boobs.
right.
And so to have Tifa be the one who is a martial artist and like will kick your ass,
Right.
and also be kind and gentle, and have Aerith be the one who's the florist and wears pink and is the mage character who you always see as more physically frail, and still be incredible. And God, I could just rant about these two forever. I love them both. I'm so happy that they're being treated right with remake and with Traces of Two Pasts and all this stuff.
All right. Mario.
Yeah, I think my answer, and it sort of times up well with Castlevania, playing it recently would be Ayami Kojima. She's most known for doing like the promotional art and the box art for a lot of those, that very like gothic style of art for the Castlevania games. And I've always found her work to be really incredible. And so I don't really have
Very
much more
distinctive.
I don't really have much more to say beyond that, but yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think she's a really interesting choice because she's one of those people, right, that usually Castlevania is associated with men. I feel like, and you're like, well, no, this like woman's like really important to this franchise, and you're just completely kind of ignoring that there are women working behind the scenes. They may not be the face in front, promoting a game, but like they are just as important to the legacy of these games.
Yeah, I would argue her artwork is as important or as defining of the Castlevania series as anything else. The Symphony of the Night sort of like promotional artwork.
I was gonna say, didn't she do Symphony of the Night? And
Like I said, basically all of those.
like,
From like that stretch of time, I would say is as defining of that franchise and is maybe as recognizable a part of that franchise as anything else in it. So
yeah. I mean, that's the visual I have when I think of Castlevania is her artwork.
Yeah. All right. Well, I chose an oldie but a goodie. I chose Roberta Williams. So Roberta Williams is the co-founder of Sierra Online, but she is most known for her work in adventure games, particularly most notably the King's Quest series. And like that's important. Like if all that Roberta Williams ever did was make really good games back in the 80s and into the 90s, like she would be super important. And even back into the 70s with Mystery House and those. She would be really important. Even if she just founded a company, was an entrepreneur and made Sierra Online and all the other games that they published, she would be important. But like what I think often gets overlooked when people talk about Roberta Williams is that the influence that she had on games as narrative devices, as storytelling tools. it's really easy. You go back to the 70s, prior to Mystery House, and there just aren't a lot of games that are telling stories. Like they're just pure gameplay based. And so with that, and then really with the King's Quest games of being, as each new technological leap came forward, she took that and was like, okay, well, how can we tell a deeper, more complex story? Even to the point of like when she did the Phantasmagoria, right, which is in a lot of ways this like beautiful train wreck of a game. But like it was her trying to embrace this new technology. Like, how can we tell more like complex stories in games? And even something like Mixed Up Mother Goose that she did. They did a special edition of that after it was originally released on CD, and they went back and added voice acting and different things to it. She's, to me, is as important as just about anyone in the history of games when it comes to narrative. Right up there with Miyamoto with what he did in Donkey Kong, and really you could argue like more sustained with what she was doing and that focus. And so every time people talk about, games are like movies now, it's like, okay, yeah, you have her largely to thank for that. There's other people, Ron Gilbert and people of that nature, but she deserves a really big part in that history. And I think it's really cool that, she went back and her and her husband did a remake of Colossal Cave Adventure. And making that game today to tell the legacy of another woman who like co-developed that game. And so that, there is this continuation of that history and like, hey, women have been here from the start. And contributing in major ways to game history. And, it's always difficult to say like this one person made this leap forward in a medium. But she was definitely a major part of it, however you kind of view that.
Just to say, one of the people at the conference, he's done a lot of work sort of looking at Roberta Williams' career. And I know he has a book about her coming out soon. So when that comes out, I'll be sure to pass it along to you.
Yeah, I'd be interested.
I know you would be fascinated by it, I'm sure.
Yeah. She's one of those people that's really interesting to listen to be interviewed today. Because she, like, I always like listening to people who like, have been in the industry for 40 or 50 years. And I know she retired and has come back now part-time or whatever her position is. But I always like those people who've been around for a really long time because they always are very philosophical now when they talk about it. So like the things that we talk about here in the news each week, they don't get dragged down into that. They're like, well, we'll see how things pan out. But then they'll be like, making video games is a lot like sitting around a campfire and telling a story. And you're like, okay, yeah, you're right. Like, and everybody's taking their turn and contributing. And like, they've just thought about it from a very big picture perspective a lot of times. And so they're always interesting. So if you get a chance to look up some of her more recent interviews on YouTube, I think those are really cool. And thank you to like all the women who are out there working in games. It's important. And as we talked about with Anita Sarkeesian, it is often a perilous fandom to be a part of for women. We know about the like sort of harassment that goes on in online games and a lot of the like language that gets used online around women. And so for those women who stick it out, and again, like it shouldn't be something they're having to stick out, but those who do, it's a really important contribution they make, and games are better for having more diverse voices involved. Little girls today, Alicia, aren't having to like have that stress of there aren't characters like me. And I'm going to be like called out for playing the horse racing game or the cooking game or Final Fantasy, right? Like, and that I can just play whatever I want. And I see that more with my students now, and I see even more with like little girls, my friends' children and stuff, and my own nieces, that That's just not the future they're growing into. And it's because of people like we're talking about that they're not growing into that same future. That does it for this week's show. Next week is spring break, and so we need to figure out if we're going to do an episode during spring break or not. We will talk about that off air, though, because who knows where that will lead. But we'll be back soon with another episode. Thank you again for tuning in and listening for 75 episodes with us.
Woo!
25 more to go to we hit 100, and then we'll do something really big and spectacular. Christina will organize all that. So, just.
I figured at that point it's syndication and we just rerun all the previous.
No, here's what we do for 100. We all play the monster truck racing game. We get Christina to play Chucky, Roblox.
That just sounds like a horror show. I think we save that for Halloween.
Yeah.
What's 25 weeks from now? 5 months from now? It'll be...
Probably pretty close to
there we go.
August-ish.
Yeah.
There we go.
We'll see. But anyways, thanks for listening. Check out SalukiGames.com. We'll be back soon with another episode.